The neighborhood I grew up in, people actually knew their neighbors. Sometimes they loved them, they liked them, sometimes they disliked them. But the point is they knew them. They knew them well enough to have opinions about them. They knew their names, they knew their street numbers, they knew what cars they drove, they knew their front yards and their backyards. They even knew the pets they owned. But that was a long time ago in another time, another city, another country, Canada, your neighbor to the north. I now live in the Upper West Side with my wife and my 2 children. And sometimes I try to inject my Canadian neighborliness into the equation, raising my kids up there. And this is the story of one of those examples. The blizzard we had a few weeks ago, the previous big blizzard in New York, the most recent one, was 9 years ago. I remember because I watched the weather very carefully as my wife was in her 9th month. And the snowplows kept piling up bigger and bigger and bigger piles of snow and swallowing up cars whole on the Upper West Side where we live and burying them for weeks on end. And around the same time, my son was born, but he had the good sense to not to be born on a snowy day, so we were able to get to Mount Sinai in a taxi, not a snowplow. We came back to the apartment and we burrowed in and we really got cozy and we felt the joy of being new parents and the warmth. From our 8th floor corner window, we looked down on 89th and West End and saw the howling snow and the cars trying to navigate the really narrow sort of paths on 89th Street that had been sort of carved between these 6-foot high snow and ice piles. And it was on one of my frequent evening walks to the local store, health food store, pharmacy to get baby stuff, and noticing that another New York tradition, a sad one, was taking place, and that was the discarding of once proud but now dried up Christmas trees. And there they were fighting for space on the curb with the snow drifts and buried cars. And it was then that it struck me the idea that I'd like to sort of do something for my son, in honor of my son, and maybe a little neighborhood improvement project or gesture. So I took the largest, most noble spruce that I could find, and I climbed to the tallest part of the entrance to the snow drifts, the snow banks on 89th Street, and I slammed the tree into the snow bank, and there it stood, giving it life again. And I clambered to the other side of the road, and I grabbed another beautiful, noble Douglas fir, and I slammed that into the other side, and here, these giant entranceway to 89th Street, sort of snaking down, were these beautiful trees living again. I went upstairs and I pointed out to my wife and my week-old son. I did that in his honor. And the next morning when I woke up, I looked outside hoping that they still stood there. And in fact, overnight, 2 more trees appeared. And during the course of the day, I planted a few more trees, and it started snaking down 89th Street towards Broadway. And the next night, about half a dozen more trees appeared, and when I woke up in the morning. And at the end of 3 or 4 days, there were over 30 trees stuck in, going all the way from West End, halfway down 89th Street to Broadway. And no one could pass without commenting or stopping or smiling or laughing or starting up a conversation. And at this point, people were dragging trees from other blocks because there were no more Christmas trees on our block. And the forest just kept growing and growing and growing. And it all started, just this sort of neighborhood humanizing. For 2 weeks in the middle of a cold winter, it just sort of became a kind of a warmer, funnier, happier, sillier neighborhood. And it was strange because 6 years later, I was in California working with some animators, finishing up a TV commercial. And one of the animators was a transplanted New Yorker who was sort of longing for her old city and neighborhood. And I said, where did you grow up in New York? And she said, 89th and West End. And I said, wow, I live on 89th and West End. What building? For 7 years, we had lived in kitty corner buildings. I was on the northwest, and she was on the southeast corner of 89th. And the very next day, she brought in a stack of personal photos. And as she handed it to me, the first photo was of Gabriel's forest. And the next 10 pictures documented how the forest grew and grew and grew and grew. And it was my own little miracle on 89th Street. Thanks.
So my friends politely pointed out that jail was a real possibility if I attempted to break into the house. But the house was in the middle of renovations at the time. There was no family there to call it a home. And the last family that called it home did so for 19 years. And that family was my own. I remember being in that kitchen for the last time, hugging my parents as we cried, and my mom later confessed that she felt like they failed us kids when they had to sell that house. She envisioned her future grandkids coming to visit and her telling them stories about the events that filled each room. But Long Island was no longer a place for lower middle class families, so my parents had to pack their truck and the car and their guilt, and they moved to St. Louis, where my mom's brother lived. They thought life would be easier. I went back to NYU, where I was a junior, taking out an additional loan so I can dorm. A couple months later, I visited them. Mom was distant, her joyous smile gone, and she started to cry as she told me they forgot some things in the attic, and the new owner was not being cooperative. There was only one item that could have that much power over her. It was the bin that contained all the Christmas tree ornaments. Most were devoted to her kids, Jimmy, Billy, Danny, and myself. She even kept those awful ornaments we created out of macaroni and popcorn in art class. Her tears revealed her fear that she'd never see them again, but her next words revealed the biggest fear of all. Billy won't be a part of Christmas anymore. My brother Billy had died 6 years earlier, and since then, she took his ornaments and hung them on the front of the tree so he'd be a part of the holiday. It was in that moment I knew what I had to do. So a few weeks later, I was in front of the house, and it looked similar but foreign at the same time, you know, like visiting your high school a year or two after you graduate. And I remember several times a week growing up, I would forget my keys and I'd go to the back of the house and break in through the basement window because that lock was always busted. So that's what I did. I ran to the back, but I was taken aback by what I saw. Brand new windows. Even the sliding glass door was new. I tried every window and door I could find, but it wouldn't budge. I was so close to that bin, but I couldn't get in. I felt like a failure. So I walked to my car. But then I felt something jabbing my thigh. And then I remembered next to my dorm room key, I still had the house key. And I looked at that lock and I'm like, nah. But I went to the door and I put that key in. And then I turned and the door opened. Adrenaline took over, and I ran through that kitchen that was awaiting new cabinets and new appliances, through that dining room that was somehow now open concept, through that living room, and then I stopped at the stairs. I looked at the space that was now barren, torn down to the studs, and I thought how this was a setting for every single Christmas I could remember. I could still see the stereo that played Johnny Mathis records all day long. And the Christmas tree by the window where my brothers and I sat, Jimmy opening up a model airplane, Billy a video game, Danny a G.I. Joe, and me a Transformer. And I could see that couch where my parents sat, my mom misty-eyed and a huge smile, because she genuinely believed that joy was in the giving. That gave me another burst of adrenaline, and I ran up those stairs to that closet that had access to the attic. Amongst several boxes, there was this big gray bin that you could find at any Home Depot, but in that moment, it was the Holy Grail, and I was Indiana Jones. I grabbed that, I ran out of the house into my car, drove away, no jail time for me. I drove to my friend's house a few blocks away, and I borrowed his phone. And I'm like, Mom, when she picked up, and she sensed urgency in my voice, and she said, "What's wrong?" I didn't know what to say, so I just opened that bin, and I grabbed a handful of bells, and I shook them aggressively, and the room filled with the sound of Christmas. She immediately started to cry, but these were happy tears, these were happy sobs, and I could feel her smile from 1,000 miles away. And then she said to me, "Thank you for giving me back Christmas." Thank you.
Okay, so many of you know that my family comes from Trinidad and Tobago, and my family came through New York and then moved to California in the United States. And so when I moved to New York, I totally expected that I would be able to be free, to meet other first-generation Trinidadians, and just have a good time. But my first year in New York, my mom calls me up, and she's like, "Donnie, you coming home for Christmas?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm coming home for Christmas. Why, what's up?" She's like, "Well, I need you to do me a favor." And I was like, "Okay, well, what do you want me to do?" So she's like, first, you're gonna go run down to Nostrand Avenue. And Nostrand Avenue is like where all the Trinidadians live. She's like, "Go run down to Nostrand Avenue. You're gonna pick up 12 Jamaican patties, okay? 6 chicken, 6 beef. Then you're gonna go pick up 12 roti skin, okay? Bring these 12 roti skin, bring these 12 Jamaican patties, and bring some saltfish back with you from New York to California." And I was like, "Wait, what? Like, why would I do that? Why, that makes no sense." And she said, "Well, don't you want a Caribbean Christmas in California?" I was like, "Yeah, well, we can want a Caribbean Christmas in California." She's like, "Well, then bring the food now, man." I was like, okay, but I was mad because I had this suitcase. In my suitcase, I'm going from New York to California, so it's gonna be warm. I just have my flip-flops, my tank tops, but now I have to take all this stuff out of my bag to pack all this other stuff for my mom. So I'm just aggravated. So I pack all the food, the saltfish, the roti, all the kind of stuff, and I bring the stuff to California so that we could have a Caribbean Christmas. And I get there and I was like, "Mom, there are black people in California, right? I can go to Oakland and go get some saltfish and some roti." She's like, no, but it's not the same. We want the good, authentic stuff from New York." And I was like, "Really? Okay, whatever. And then, we have a good feast and we live it up. The next year, my mom calls me up again. And she's like, "Dawn, you're coming home for Christmas?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm coming home for Christmas. Why? What's up?" She's like, "Well, I need you to do me a favor." I'm like, "Okay, what do you need me to do this time?" She's like, "Well, this year we're gonna go to Trinidad for Christmas, okay?" And I was like, "Oh, sweet." So I'm thinking to myself, this is awesome. I don't need to bring any type of roti. I don't need to bring any saltfish. I don't need to bring any Jamaican patties. I was like, "Okay, cool. What do you need me to do?" She says, "Go run down to the Pathmark, okay? The supermarket. And you're gonna go pick up a 30-pound turkey, okay? You're gonna take this turkey, you're gonna put it in the freezer, and you're gonna deep freeze this turkey, all right? You're gonna bring this turkey with you from New York to Trinidad." And I was like, "Wait, what? There's no turkeys in Trinidad?" She's like, "You don't want a good, big Caribbean Trinidadian turkey for Christmas?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I want a big Trinidadian, I guess, or whatever." She's like, "Then bring the turkey." And I was like, Mom, seriously, this sounds like foul play, okay? This is like literally crossing the line. And is this legal? She's like, "Just bring it." So I take this turkey and I put it in my freezer and I deep freeze it for about 2 weeks. And then the day comes where I'm flying off to Trinidad for Christmas, and it's wrapped up in all this foil, all this aluminum, all this type of stuff, and I throw it in my backpack. And my mom lives in this little tiny village way in the corner of Tobago. And so in order to get there, I first have to fly from JFK Airport to Miami Airport, from Miami Airport to Trinidad's Airport, a little 2-propeller jet into Tobago. I'm going through this process, and I still got this 30-pound turkey on my bag. But as I get to Trinidad's immigration, it's starting to drip. And I don't know if this is going to work. So I am looking at the immigration official, and he says to me, "Mom, you have anything to declare?" And I'm thinking, okay, I don't know if I need to declare a turkey. So I say, no. He's like, okay. I get on the other little two-propeller jet. I get to Tobago. Turkey's dripping, 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 dripping. I'm like, this is just gonna be a wreck. It would take 2 hours to get to my mom's little village in Charlottesville. I'm there, I'm happy. I was like, I've gone on this long, extensive trip to bring this turkey. I get there, I was like, Mom, here it is. Your turkey has arrived. It's here, it's here. She's like, oh, good, good. Go put it in the freezer, quick, quick, because everybody's waiting. Your sister, she brought the ham. And your cousin, he brought the 3-layer cake. I was like, wait, the 3-layer cake? From where? She's like, oh, he just brought it from Florida. He put it up in the he put it up in the area, above in the plane. Yeah. And I was like, so wait, I brought a turkey. My cousin brought this 3-layer cake. My sister brought this ham. And here I was thinking that I was gonna be saving the day with my big old, turkey. And that's what it hit me, that all these years of traveling back and forth with food and all this stuff wasn't a pain. It was just something that I guess that our family did. We just travel with food. That's what we do, I guess, as a family. As a Fraser, this is what I'm expected to do. So last year, when I was returning to California for Christmas, when my mom called me up and she's like, "You coming home for Christmas?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm coming home for Christmas." And I looked down at my suitcase. It was empty and ready to be filled with whatever food she needed.
Now, I am not religious at all. My mother's Jewish. My father's a nice little goyim. I was a nice mix. They said, you can do whatever you want. And I said, great, I choose neither. I'm going to choose the holidays that have the best food. So Lent was out the window. Yom Kippur was out the window. But my grandmother, on the other hand, Elizabeth Tobkis, she was very religious. She was the nice Jew that had the latke in her pocket when we, went through her clothes after she died, and we were expecting to find money, we were expecting to find jewelry, but we found an old latke. And it was great. We would visit her in the nursing home, and she would celebrate the holidays with us, and she would celebrate all of the little, we'd have Hanukkah celebration with her. We'd have a Passover Seder. She wouldn't remember who I was, but we'd have a Passover Seder with her. And that continued, and I had her menorah, and one day I said, Mom, can I take this menorah to college with me? And she looked at me, she said, absolutely not. This is in my family for too long, you can't take it with you. And I said, Mom, can I, it's tradition in the Jewish faith, in case you're not familiar, to ask twice. And I said, Mom, can I please take this menorah to college with me? And she said, fine, I'm gonna wrap it up all nice, I'm gonna put it in a little box, and you're not gonna touch it until Hanukkah. And I said, okay, fine. So Hanukkah comes around. This is now last year around, Hanukkah was late last year, it was around Christmas time. So my house that I lived in with 8 other people was mostly Christians, so we had a Christmas tree. And I said, okay, I'm gonna, Jew this up a little bit. I'm gonna put the menorah right next to the Christmas tree, right in the window on the 2nd floor so everyone else on the street can see it. And I said, my grandmother would love this. It's her menorah, she would love this. And each night, I would go up and I would walk upstairs, because I lived on the 1st floor, and I'd light the menorah. And first night went by, great. Second night went by, great, haven't burned anything down. This was an old house. Third night goes by, great. Fourth night comes, and I'm feeling a little down. Senior year of college was a little rough for me, as I'm sure it's a little rough for most people. You're writing thesis, you're dealing with relationships, it's a time. And I'm lighting the menorah, and I say, all right, you know what? Here's something I haven't done in a long time. In fact, my entire life. I'm going to pray. I sing the song to no one. There's no one there. Everyone's doing their own thing. But I'm going to sing it to myself, And then my grandmother, God bless. And I say, all right, I'm going to pray. And I say, all right. I'm not on my knees because it's a dirty floor. But I'm going to sit down in my chair. And I say, all right, how do I start? Elizabeth. No, that's too formal. Grandma, can you hear me? And I say, I'm going to light my candles for you tonight. And I'm going through and I'm lighting the candles. And it's the fourth night, so you light 5 candles. And I'm going through the prayer, and I say, Grandma, can you hear me? And I look out, and looking out the window, nothing. It's cloudy. Looking out the window, maybe I'll see something. Is there a cat? No. She liked cats. And I'm sitting there, and I'm just looking at the candles, and they're flickering, and all of a sudden they go out. I'm like, that was weird. There's no wind. I'm inside. There shouldn't be a draft. I paid rent this month. And I say, Grandma, is that you? And there's a knock on the door. I'm like, that's weird. Again, I paid rent this month. There shouldn't be a knock on the door. Shouldn't be anyone coming for me, I promise. And I go down and there's no one there. And I come back up, and it turns out one candle had stayed lit, and it's the shamus, which is the candle that you light all the other candles with. And that was the night I realized my grandmother was still with me. Thank you.
So this is a reading from the book of Peter, chapter 19, verse 2. I was 19 years old, and I had just finished my first semester at college, and I got home with my bag of laundry, and things weren't looking too good for me and my mom. I walked into the house, and she had told me over that semester to expect some changes when I got home, and it didn't really hit me until I walked in the door, and the first thing that I saw was that her upright piano that she had had since she was a kid was gone. She had sold it. I walked through the foyer into the living room, and there was just a broken couch and a television on top of another television. One had a working picture and the other had working sound. And all the other furniture was gone. My dad had taken it 4 years ago when he had left, and for some reason the impressions from his lazy boy were still there as some kind of reminder of what a dick he is. I walked up, passed through the living room, and went up through toward the dining room, and the beautiful dining room set that had been in her family for generations was gone. It was a dark mahogany set, really ornate, and with these beautiful carved chairs and a glass break front and a buffet table, and that was gone. And I walked upstairs to put my stuff away, and her bedroom door was open, and the only thing left in the room was her bed. Her bedroom set was gone. There's nothing more depressing than a bedroom with no furniture. You can see all the little dings and mistakes and tears in the wallpaper that are hidden by things. And then I saw in my sister's room, it was still a shrine to my sister that had moved in with my dad, with her Pepto-Bismol pink walls and her canopy bed and her toy box, like she was going to move back and become a little child again, but she wasn't. My bedroom was just the way it always was. We got covered in posters with broken particle board furniture and a water bed for some reason. With a broken heater, so you had to put quilts on top of it so you wouldn't get arthritis. She couldn't sell any of that anyway. I told my mother for years after the divorce to just sell the house. It was too big for the two of us after my sister left. It was especially too big once I was gone, when I went to college. And the bills had to have been killing her. But her stubborn Polish pride kept her in the house. I guess she wanted to show to the outside world that everything was okay, but on the inside it was just kind of decaying around her. But she wasn't able to really deal with it in any kind of a real way. just selling things and taking it day by day. She was a nurse. She still is. And at the time, she was working on the weekends doing 24, 40 shifts at a dual diagnosis psychiatric drug unit. And during the week, she took a job at a perfume counter in the mall to make some extra money. And she doesn't like people telling her when to take a break. So that wasn't going to last long. She's a Polak, a strong, big-headed, pumpkin-headed Polak. She got home that day, and she was happy to see me. Not as effusive as usual, but, she made dinner. She made a tomato casserole that she always made with canned tomatoes, Wonder Bread, and American cheese. Yeah. And we sat in the kitchen on the 2 chairs on the kitchen table because the other chair I broke, and the other chair I also broke. And we ate our food, and we kind of talked about, college that semester being over. And she said, Peter, we can't really have much of a Christmas this year. There's not going to be any presents. I got your sister a little something, because she doesn't live here anymore, but we really can't afford any presents. I said, are we going to have a tree? She said, we can't afford a tree. Decorations, I don't have time to decorate. I'm okay, all right, okay. So she said, I got an idea. I thought this would be funny. Why don't we, over the next 2 weeks, we'll cut out pictures out of catalogs and magazines of things that we would give to each other if we could. Oh, go ahead. And we laughed about it, and then we cried about it. And then we laughed about it again, because if you don't laugh about it, you're going to eat a bullet. So the next morning, she went off to work, and I decided I was going to throw myself into Christmas. And I decided I was going to go get a tree, and I was going to make this the best Christmas I possibly could. So I went, this is down in South Jersey, a small town, and this is before Walmart and Home Depot and outlet stores were down there. So there was one Christmas tree farm, the DeBolt Christmas tree farm. So I went over there figuring they'd give me a deal because I used to date their daughter. But turns out they didn't give me a deal because I used to date their daughter. And the tree was like $60. I was like, screw that. So I went back home and I got a hacksaw and I cut out a tree from my side yard. And it wasn't even like a pine tree. It was some kind of like stunted maple tree. And I brought it in the house and I put it in the tree holder in the stand. And I went up in the attic and I got the box of decorations and ornaments and I hung there were about 6 branches. I put about 20 ornaments on each branch. And then I just took the tangled lights and I just threw them on it. And it was beautiful, It was really kind of nice. She came home and, she was, I guess, happy, and that was how that was. And I just started throwing myself into this project of giving my mother everything I possibly could give her for Christmas. She always wanted a forest green Jaguar convertible, so I cut out one of those. And then she wanted a jacuzzi, had a shower called the J Dream with about 20 nozzles and like a little dude that made sandwiches. And I cut out one of those. And like gold and diamonds and jewelry and a new vacuum cleaner and everything she could ever possibly want in the world. And I really kind of sunk myself into it. I was, I'd go over, hang out at my friends' houses and kind of take their mom's Currier and Ives catalogs and get all these catalogs and magazines so I could give my mom the best Christmas ever, And I felt like I was in a kind of bizarro O. Henry novel, and one that he never should have written. And that just kind of consumed me over the next, couple weeks. And I figured, this is sad, but this is beautiful, and we're going to connect over this, and it's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. It was one night in between coming home and Christmas, and the two of us were sitting watching the Charlie Brown Christmas special, and one of the TVs was on cable and the other was on broadcast, so the video was a little ahead of the audio because the audio was on broadcast, but you just pretend, I don't know, you're in Japan, it doesn't matter, so we're watching that, and my mom was so distracted, she was there, but she wasn't there. And, my mother and I were like partners. When my parents' marriage broke up, she still feels guilty to this day about maybe making me grow up sooner than I did as being the man of the house or whatever. And we were friends and roommates and partners. It was me and her against the world. And she was the one I always loved coming home to, and the one that would let me get away with anything, and the one that would always be the one to be proud of me when I did something right, and would take a day off from work and drive to the zoo with me when I did something wrong. And she was not there anymore. This house was crushing her, just crushing her, and all because she couldn't see the option of getting rid of it. And you know, it was killing me, man. It's like, that's my road dog. That's my mom, you know. That's my girl. And I lost her. She just wasn't there anymore. And it was just killing me. Her eyes were just empty, you know. She was in another world. And she was worried about things that she couldn't figure out how to fix. So on Christmas Eve, I went with my buddy Brian. We got drunk on a jug of Livingston Cellars wine and went to midnight mass. Because when you're under 21 and Catholic, that's where you go to see your friends, you know, because you can't get into the bars yet. And it was great, man. Mass was awesome. My mom didn't go to midnight mass anymore because 4 years before, when my dad left us, it was during midnight mass. What a dick. Like, as the priest was walking up, he stood up and walked out in front of everyone that we knew, everyone she grew up with, everyone I grew up with, everyone we went to school with, went to church with, hung out with. They all saw our family crumbling in front of us. So my mom doesn't. My dad's a dick. Like, I mean, is he here tonight? No, he's not, because he's a dick. You know what I mean? God. Such a dick. So my mom doesn't go to midnight mass anymore. Now, I got home that night, and the next morning, I woke up late, and I brought my little bundles of pictures, tied up with scraps of ribbon, and I put them under the tree, and I waited for my mom to come down, and I heard her stirring upstairs and heard her come down and making coffee, and she came downstairs in her big red Sally Jesse Raphael morning glasses, and she came down with a cup of coffee, and she looked at the things I was offering her, and she just went, wait a minute. And she went back upstairs, and she was up there for a couple minutes. I'm like, how long does it take to bring down some papers? I hope she's okay. She have diarrhea, like it's Christmas, I don't know, like post-traumatic, whatever. But so anyway, she comes back down, and we start to exchange our gifts. And she's opening up a car and a vacuum in the shower and gold and a brand new piano and a bedroom set and a beautiful, beautiful picture of a dining room set that would be at home in the White House. You know, I tried to give her everything that she had to get rid of to keep this life together. She wanted there, more than anything in the world, she wanted there to be some stability for her kids, to have a place that was always going to be home, the home that we grew up in, and it was killing her, and I was trying to do anything I could to maybe make that better, you know, and so she's just looking at these things and just smiling and laughing, and then I start to open up mine, and there's 3 of them, and there's one, it's a picture of some Reese's peanut butter cups, and a picture of some Homer Simpson slippers, and a picture of a karaoke machine. All from the same Rite Aid catalog that was up in her bathroom upstairs, because she completely forgot. And this thing that I really thought it was just, it was the one-sided thing. And she's laughing about it now, over there. That's hilarious. Yeah, wave. And then so she went upstairs to make breakfast in the kitchen, and I sat there, and it was just kind of I don't know, like I don't want to be too silly about it. It was like a needle piercing me in the heart. Thank you, Maz. And it was just like this life that we had, that was the 2 of us, was just gone. She would have done anything for me. And she still was, but it just wasn't working anymore. And she forgot this thing because the house was killing her, money was killing her, and everything was killing her. There was nothing I could do. Just nothing. So I went upstairs, and she did make pancakes. My mom makes really good pancakes. She fries them up in like bacon grease, and they're like God, they're all crispy around the edges. And she makes me one that's as big as the frying pan and cuts it out to look like Pac-Man and puts it on my plate ever since I was a little boy. You know, she'll give me a second one if I wanted. But this day there was no Pac-Man face. It was just silver dollar pancakes, and they were all burnt. And we sat there eating these burnt pancakes, wondering what the hell was going on with our lives. If you today, 14 years later, if you go to my mother's house, where she lives with her new husband, you can go down in the basement and you can kind of see a million boxes, and you walk past the Ark of the Covenant and you go over in the back. And if you were an archaeologist, you could kind of look at the strata of our lives and pick out which year these things happened. And, oh, this is when Peter quit football, and this is when, Michelle had epilepsy growing up, and this is when, their dad was a dick. That's all of them. And then there's one box, if you look at it in Christmas in 1995, if you dig into it, you can see a little velvet bag with a bunch of small pictures cut out of catalogs and magazines. And right underneath of that was stuff that took place a couple months later. I got my belated Christmas present. It was a picture that my mom sent me when I was away at school of her standing in front of the house with a for sale sign in front of it. She decided to sell the house, and she moved into a small townhouse, and she took a little hit on her pride, but I got my girl back.
I'm always afraid I'm going to forget something important, so I write everything down, including what we do every Christmas. I was reading what I wrote down from last year. We had picked up my mother early to spend the day with us, and I had the house decorated in all these little white lights, and I had made my mom special coffee. And she was sitting and having her coffee, and she's Colombian, and she says, "I don't know what you do to make this coffee so delicious, but it's the best coffee in the world." And what my mother doesn't know is that her coffee is so delicious because I add a quarter cup of Bailey's to it. So she sips, and she chats, and she sips some more, and she says, "Have those lights always looked so pretty?" Now, I have 3 children, but it's my youngest, Augie, who is my mom's best friend. Last Christmas, he gave her this little plastic black and white cow. And this cow, you squeeze its udders. And we had seen it on the Ellen show. So you squeeze its udders, and it spits out these red and green balls. So my mom and my son spend the entire day having this cow spit balls at my butt every time I bend over. Now, this special coffee makes this really funny. So it goes on over and over. So I'm driving my mom home last year after she's been with us all day long. And she doesn't know what is happening with her day. She was diagnosed with dementia about 8 years ago, and she's trying to decide the best part of her day. Whether it was the coffee, whether it was the cow. She really liked the cow. She doesn't know. And we're laughing and we're talking, and then things get quiet, like loud quiet. And I can feel my mother staring at the side of my face, and I can't stand the tension anymore, so I ask her, "Mama, what is it? Is there something you want to say?" And she says just one stark sentence: "Promise me that next year you'll have something under the tree for the little one." Now, everything wrong rushes out of my mouth because she's scaring me. I say, "Don't talk that way. Why are you saying those things? Don't say that. You'll be with us." But my mother has never asked me for anything in my life. So I promise her, "Yes, Mama, there will be something from you for Augie under the tree next year." So we go shopping, and she picks out a present for Augie, and she picks out the silver paper to wrap it in, and on the gift tag she writes, "For Augie, love, Nona," and her letter L is this beautiful loop. and I take the present to the basement so that she can give it to him next year. So a few weeks before Christmas this year, I go to the basement and I bring up all the presents that I've hidden all over the house. And I bring them up, and I bring up my box of ribbons and bows and paper and scissors, and I go to the refrigerator and I get a bottle of beer, because if I'm going to be wrapping all night, I'm going to do it Wisconsin style. So I have everything set up, and it's about 1 a.m, and then I see it. It's the present that my mother bought for my son. And I don't know what to do with myself, because I don't have a mother anymore. And I remember the promise I made to her. But the thought of this gift under the tree is too much. And if I start crying, I won't stop. And ever since my mother dies, our entire household has had to work to make sure and pretend that everything is okay for Augie. He cries. He misses her. He says, "It's hard, Mama." And I know this, but still I think of that promise I made for my mother. I wrap the gift and I walk to the tree to put it underneath with the other presents. But then I stop. No. I put it back in the box with the wrapping paper and everything, and I carry it down to the basement. Well, Christmas comes this year, and we go to church, and we have dinner, and we open the presents, and we're getting down to the last few, and I get this feeling that I have one chance to either do things really right or really wrong. So I go down to the basement, and I look for that silver gift, and I bring it upstairs. And I don't know where my allegiance lies. Is it with my mother? Is it with my son? And I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I mean, I made this promise to my mother, but my son hasn't cried for a good, solid 4 weeks about his grandmother. I come back upstairs, and I say, there's still one more gift. Everybody turns around and looks at me. I look at the tag, and I see the swirly letter L of my mother's writing. I begin to read, "For Augie." But I can't finish because I don't know how to do this without her. So I bury my face in my hands, and my son rushes over. I have made a huge mistake. He looks at the gift, he looks at the tag. When he sees it, his face breaks out into this big smile, and he reads, "For Augie, love, Nona." Thank you.
It was Christmas time, 1974. I was 10 years old, but I wasn't looking forward to Christmas that year. The previous spring, my mother and the man who was to become my stepfather when all the divorces had been finalized and he and my mother could marry, had moved us from rural central Alabama to sunny Southern California. My brother and I were leaving behind our father and all our extended family. This would be my first Christmas away from Alabama. My beautiful and elegant mother took to California like a swan to a royal lake. My soon-to-be stepfather was a California native. My very athletic little brother reveled in a temperate climate that allowed him to be outside 11 months of the year. I, however, was a fat, awkward child with a high-pitched voice and a heavy Southern accent. I was having extreme difficulty with the transition to a West Coast lifestyle. My first day at my new school, I walked to the front of my 4th grade class to introduce myself. All I said was my name and where I was from, and the class erupted in laughter, with jeers of, "He talks funny and he has a weird accent." It took the teacher nearly 2 full minutes to restore order, and she was angry at me for having caused a disruption. I was so disillusioned after that first day that instead of walking home after school, I went to a nearby gas station and used a phone booth there to try and place a collect call to Granny Smith, my paternal grandmother. She was my biggest ally. I was going to ask her if I could return to Alabama and live with her, and if she would send me the money for a bus ticket home. But despite several attempts, the line was busy and I never got through. My mother was constantly encouraging, nagging, and badgering me to lose weight, and always trying to help with that endeavor with whatever the latest diet craze was. She had been a fat child herself, but with puberty she had gained height and lost weight and undergone the proverbial ugly duckling transformation to become a great beauty in high school. She saw weight loss as the panacea of all problems and believed it to be the key to my happiness. She was very relieved to have me away from the annual holiday sugar binges and weight gain that my Granny Smith's cooking provided. Granny Smith was for me everything good about Christmas. Her language of love was food. She was an excellent baker and candy maker. She would cook for weeks in preparation for Christmas Eve, when all of her children and grandchildren would gather at her house. Every favorite dish, dessert, and confection had been made to specification. Her table and sideboard groaned under the weight of all of the food. My brother, my cousins, and I would burst through her kitchen door brimming with anticipation, our arrival announced by the sound of 5 silver bells suspended from red velvet ribbon hung on a plastic poinsettia bouquet on the door. Her house was tiny and saturated with tacky Christmas decorations and cigarette smoke. But to my childhood aesthetic, it was glorious. She sewed new pajamas for all of her grandchildren. She scoured newspaper ads, catalogs, and stores all over town to get us exactly the toys we had requested. She was interested in me and my happiness. She was my resilience. She was magical, and I missed her desperately. It was Sunday evening, and I was moping around the house, dreading Monday and the return to school. Fortunately, there was only 1 week left until the Christmas break. I was longing for my familiar Southern Christmas. That Thanksgiving we had spent with my stepfather's extended family. He and my mother had finally gotten married in Vegas over the summer. His family were polite, kind people, but I did not know them and fit poorly into their established routine, and I feared that Christmas would be more of the same. The phone rang. It was Granny Smith. She often took advantage of the discounted long-distance rates after 7 p.m. on Sundays. She spoke with my brother Todd and I for nearly half an hour, asked us about our life and school and how things were going, assured us she had gotten the toys that we wanted and they would be there by Christmas. But before we hung up, she asked to speak to our mother. This request made my brother and me very anxious. When our parents separated, they didn't so much dissolve a marriage as declare war on each other. My brother and I knew that the campaigns and battles of this war could be long and brutal. My mother considered Granny Smith to be in the enemy camp. They maintained a civil but strained relationship. My brother and I were always worried that hostilities might erupt whenever they spoke to each other. Granny Smith informed my mother that she had sent a Christmas package and that it should arrive in the coming week. My mother said, "Thank you, but you didn't have to do that. It's very expensive to ship things across the country. I hope you did not have to spend a lot of money." Despite their differences, my mother understood and respected that Granny Smith was a woman of very modest means. Granny had been a widow for nearly 30 years and worked mostly menial jobs. For her, money was always scarce. Granny said it wasn't very expensive at all, and I was happy to do it. They exchanged polite but tense pleasantries, wished each other Merry Christmas, and said goodbye, and my brother and I breathed a sigh of relief. Sure enough, on Thursday after school, the phone rang. But it wasn't the U.S. Postal Service. It was the Greyhound bus lines calling to say we had a package waiting at the bus terminal in Claremont, California. My mother said to the clerk on the phone, "I didn't even know that Greyhound shipped packages." The clerk said, "Oh, yes, ma'am, and we're much cheaper than the Postal Service because we don't deliver door to door. We have some of the cheapest rates around." My mother was a little annoyed by this since the bus station was nearly 10 miles away. But the clerk had assured her that the bus station was open 24 hours a day and that there was someone on duty at the shipping desk around the clock. We could pick the package up at any time. So after supper, we drove to the bus station. We went in to see the clerk. He confirmed that we had a package, and then he said to my mother, "You can pull your car around into the loading bay." My mother said, "What for?" He said, "Oh, the package is too large to hand over the counter." My mother said, "Are you sure you've got the right package?" This irritated the clerk, and he leaned over the counter and addressed my brother and me and said, "Are you guys Lee and Todd Smith?" We nodded and said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Then this package is for you. I'll meet you around back." We drove around to the loading bay, and the shipping clerk came to our car with a hand truck carrying a heavily reinforced cardboard box large enough to hold a dishwasher or small refrigerator. He said this barely makes it inside the maximum freight dimensions and weight restrictions as he hoisted the box into our trunk and went to get some twine to tie the trunk lid closed. My brother and I were giddy with anticipation on the drive home, wondering what the box contained. Our mother was not in such a good humor. She knew her ex-mother-in-law well and was suspicious of the box. When we got home, we had to go inside and get our stepfather. The box was too heavy for us to get out of the trunk. He grunted and complained as he sat the box down in the living room and said, "What the hell did she send, a jeweler's safe?" My brother and I tore into the box, and the smell of our granny's house wafted into the air, a combination of fried meat, grease, furniture polish, and cigarette smoke. There, beneath wadded newspaper and Excelsior, was our Southern Christmas. There were presents wrapped in colorful paper and bows to go under the tree. Neatly folded in brown paper was a new set of pajamas for both of us. There were also 2 5-count packs of Fruit of the Loom underwear in the appropriate sizes for us both. There was a countless number of decorative tins and repurposed Cool Whip containers. We opened them to find mounds of homemade Christmas treats, divinity, fudge, boiled chocolate cookies, parched peanuts, a massive container of nuts and bolts, which is what Southerners call homemade Chex Party Mix, but to which no prepackaged Chex Party Mix will ever compare. A whole fruit cake, a chocolate pound cake. She even included our traditional stocking stuffers of candy bars, chewing gum, citrus fruits, and pecans and walnuts in the shell. The box was as bottomless as Mary Poppins' satchel. As every sugary confection came out of the box, my brother and I shrieked with delight, and our mother moaned in defeat. Mother tried a last-ditch effort to hide all the confections and dole them out a few at a time, but each evening, when our stepfather arrived home, he would begin to search for them, and our mother's scheme would be thwarted. Eventually, she just gave up and left it all out on the kitchen counter. Each Christmas that we spent in California, Greyhound would call and say that our package had arrived. Over the years, many treasures arrived in the box: hand-crocheted Afghans, an heirloom family quilt, homemade Christmas decorations, a check to help with the purchase of my first car. For me, it was always the best part of Christmas. Even after I moved out of the house, the box continued to arrive. My friends and roommates at college were always astounded and delighted by the contents of the box. My grandmother was able to package and ship magic and love. Granny is long gone and missed more each year. Since her death, I have discovered in conversations with my cousins that Granny came to the rescue of all of her grandchildren at one time or another, softening what would have been hard and harmful emotional landings. She did it in such a way that we each thought we were her favorite. Granny had endured a sad and difficult childhood with a mother who suffered from mental illness. She understood the importance of a child having an ally when a parent fails them. Each year, a few days after Thanksgiving, I hang Granny's plastic poinsettia bouquet with the bells on my front door to announce the arrival of holiday guests. I have mastered many of her recipes, and last year finally managed a very respectable batch of divinity. When the Christmas season arrives, I lovingly remember Granny and cherish the magic and resilience she gave me. And during the holiday season, when I see a Greyhound bus on the highway, I think to myself, in the belly of that machine may travel some child's Christmas.
Christmas Eve, driving home from church on Christmas Eve was the most magical time of my life for the first 14 years of my life. But let me tell you what happened in 1971. The price of gasoline was 36 cents per gallon, and there was an energy shortage. So it was long lines. If you know the Parkway, you'd be in line from Route 22 to Route 22, waiting for your turn to buy gas if your license plate ended in the right number that day. So, along with the energy crisis, it was unpatriotic to have Christmas lights. Previous to this year, driving home on Christmas Eve, we would see all the beautiful Christmas lights. And we would comment, "This is the best one I've seen so far." "No, wait, you haven't seen that one." Best part was it was always dark by the time we were driving home. But 1971 was a different year for more than just the reason about the energy crisis. My father went into the hospital the day after Thanksgiving, and he wasn't doing very well. So it was kind of a tough Christmas season. So I read in the local little green sheet of our hometown that since lights were not patriotic, we in our community were going to do Luminaria. How many of you know what Luminaria are? By applause. Okay. For those of you that don't know, it's a brown paper bag with some sand in it and a candle. You put the brown paper bag in the front of your yard, you put the sand in, that holds it in place, you put the candle in and you light it. I read about that in the green sheet, and I said, that's the dumbest idea I ever heard. And the idea was, we will light our town with Luminaria, and it will guide the baby Jesus home. And I thought, I'm not buying it. It sounds like a fire hazard. Sounds dumb. But on that Christmas Eve, as we were driving home, and there were no beautiful Christmas lights to look at, we saw a Luminaria, and people had placed them like every 6 feet along their property lines. Just streets were lined, and as we got closer and closer to home, imagine what an airport runway looks like when you see just the lights leading the planes that way. That's how the roads of my hometown were starting to look. My brother was 18, I was 15. He says, "Oh, look, there's a house that doesn't have any." And I'm thinking in the back of my mind, you know what? We don't have any. But I didn't say that out loud. I just kind of sat there and thought, ruh-roh. But as we got closer and closer and closer to our house, we're seeing more and more and more and more Luminaria. I mean, my hometown did it up right. We were showing the baby Jesus where to find the way home. When we get to our street, I am like sweating bullets because I know we're going to pull up, oh, there's a house with no Luminaria, and it would be our house. But as we got closer and closer to our home, we saw the most amazing thing. Our neighbors who knew how sick my dad had been had stepped up and bought Luminaria to place in our front yard. And I was so touched by that it wasn't till last year I could tell that story without bursting into tears. So, thank you. Thanks. I want to append my story, thank you, by telling you that was a tough Christmas because my dad was very sick and did die in January. But 2001, 30 years later, was going to be one of the first Christmases I was dealing with after a divorce. And everybody's saying, oh, Merry Christmas, have fun with your family. I thought to myself, this is going to be a tough Christmas. But I remembered how thoughtful our neighbors had been with the Luminaria. And somebody at work said, Denise, I know you don't have anybody. Here's my phone number. Keep it in your back pocket and call me if you get too lonely on Christmas. So what I'm asking each of you to do, write your phone number on a piece of paper and give it to someone that you think may need it this Christmas. Thank you.